Hello Pixies, and welcome to or back to my channel. It's Zoe here, and today I'm going to be talking about my 2025 TBR. Now on this list I have a series that I want to read, a standalone I would like to read, as well as I would like to read at least the first book or to continue on with the series, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to finish the series or anything of that, or read the first book, so it won't be everything. And I also have two categories for the video. I have rereads, which are books that I have either read completely or read part of the series on the list. And I also obviously have books that I've never read before. And I don't think we really need any more explanation, so let's just hop into the video. First, I want to talk about my rereads. And one of the first rereads I have here is actually a book I think I've talked about a couple times on my channel already, and that is Graceling, and I consider this a classic YA fantasy novel because it's kind of the first to kind of do the tropes that are present in this. I believe this is the first time we have a main character who is an assassin in YA fantasy, and if you know, in YA and adult, assassin characters have kind of taken off these last few years. But in Graceling, we have regular people in this high fantasy world, but there are also people who have graces, and a grace is an extraordinary skill that these people possess. So we follow our main character, Katza, who is niece to the king, and she's just supposed to be a high nobility, live a privileged, rather simple life. But when she is 8 years old, her grace reveals itself, and she actually has the grace to kill. She can do it so easily with barely lifting a finger without any extra effort at all. So then she is placed in the care of the king to basically be his personal hitman. But then one day a foreign prince named Poe catches her attention because he has a grace similar to her. He isn't scared of her, and vice versa. And we follow them on their journey in this series. I know I have read at least the main trilogy because I think there are two other books that are in this Graceling universe but aren't really connected to the main plot. I think that's Winter's Keep. I think Bitter Blue's the third one, but I know there's definitely two others. I don't quite remember, but I know I've at least read the main series. But here's the thing, I remember reading them, I remember really enjoying them, I remember wanting more, but I cannot tell you a single thing that actually happens in these books. I read it 10 or almost 11 years ago, and that's a while ago. So that could be why. And I originally read these on my Nook back in the day. That's when you know it's old, when I was reading it on a Nook. But I would really like to retry the series because I remember really enjoying this, and I do really consider this the YA fantasy book to kick off the YA fantasy genre. Next in my rereads category is actually going to be the Mortal Instruments series, and I'm hoping to actually reread this entire series this year. But right now I'm just holding up City of Bones, and if you don't know, in this book we follow Clary, and at the beginning of this book, Clary witnesses a murder, but then the body disappears. No one else can see the people who committed this murder. They're covered in tattoos. It's just shrouded in mystery and kind of a supernatural flair. And later on, Clary discovers that these are the Shadow Hunters, and she is welcomed into the Shadow Hunter world because she can see them and learns things about herself and the ones that she becomes friends with in the process. Now again, I read this not very long after I read Graceling, and while I do quite remember the events of the series, I'm kind of fuzzy on some parts. And also, I've never read another Cassandra Clare book, and I would really like to read the rest of the Shadow Hunters universe, as well as the Sword Catchers book, which is her first adult novel. So I would really like to continue on with those, and I know a lot of them are technically prequels to the Mortal Instruments because the Mortal Instruments takes place in a more modern setting. But I really think it would just be beneficial to reread these first because I am kind of familiar with these, and then go on to the Clockwork ones and everything else. But for 2025, I'm only going to be focusing on the Mortal Instruments. If I do continue on with the Shadow Hunters universe, that's great, but if it doesn't happen, that's also fine because I'm only hoping to reread the Mortal Instruments series this year. And next up, I want to talk about one that I don't own, and that is Peter and the Starcatchers. And Peter and the Starcatchers is a middle grade fantasy series where we follow like the origins of Peter Pan, but instead of it being fairy tale or like classic, like, it's much more of a fast adventure book. And I remember reading these books as a literal child, and I remember some events really well, but I don't remember all of it. And I honestly don't know if I ever finished the series. And because of that, I'm kind of leaning towards that I didn't finish this series. But I remember really liking it, and I have a video planned for next year surrounding Peter Pan, so I would really like to reread Peter and the Starcatchers. Just the first one I'm putting on this list, but if I read the rest of the series, that's also gonna be good. I remember enjoying these. They're very magical, fun adventures, and that's exactly what I like in my middle grade fantasy books. Sorry I don't have more of an explanation, but there's like barely anything online about it. In keeping with that middle grade fantasy theme, I have the Kane Chronicles. Specifically here, I'm holding up the Red Pyramid, which is the first one of the trilogy, but I'm planning on reading all three in 2025. If you don't know, the Kane Chronicles is also written by Rick Riordan. This was actually his second series following in like this demigod kind of world. But in this series, we follow two twins. We follow Carter and Sadie Kane. Now, after their mother died, the twins became separated. Carter went with his father, who is an Egyptologist, and they travel around the world, but Carter doesn't have any friends. He doesn't really connect with family. They're always on the move. He's being homeschooled, and he wants stability. Meanwhile, Sadie has been left in the care of their grandparents, but what she really wants is to be with her father. She doesn't care that much for the stability of being able to go to a regular school and have friends and have more family than just their father around. And so they kind of have nothing in common and have been separated for quite some time. But then on the events of one Christmas Eve, I believe, their father disappears and they are thrown into the world of the Egyptian gods. Not like literally, but they learn of the Egyptian gods' existence and the power of magicians. So they aren't demigods in this one. And once again, I've read these in the past, a really long time ago. I actually own these on my Nook as well, just to show you how long it's been. But I haven't reread them. I don't think I've reread them ever. And I love the Percy Jackson universe, the Riordan verse, if you will. I love those stories, so I would like to reread the Kane Chronicles this upcoming year. I actually wanted to read it this year, but unfortunately it just didn't happen. But in 2025, it is definitely going to work out, and it's going to be great. It's going to be great. I know he didn't do everything perfectly in this one, but I'd rather see someone try to do things than not do them at all. And last up, actually, for my reread category is Sarah J. Maas's Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood. Now, I read this book like the month it came out, and I loved it. And I honestly, at the time, thought it could just have been a standalone and just been titled Crescent City, because it's a great murder mystery where we follow Bryce, who is a half-fae. And unfortunately for Bryce, her life has kind of gone downhill after the death of her best friend. But then she is thrown back into the dangers of this world when there are these mysterious deaths happening, and she is brought in to try to figure that out. And in her care to help her figure it out is Hunt, who is a fallen archangel who is now just being used by them as punishment for trying to overthrow the other archangels. And they enter a tumultuous relationship, basically. And there's a really good mystery plot in here. I had so much fun with this. And honestly, I really thought this could be a standalone. I was kind of confused once I kind of realized it was going to be a series. And I never continued on with the series. I got House of Sky and Breath not very long after it released. I don't have the third one yet. But after seeing people talk about it online, I'm honestly kind of scared to read the second one because I love this one so much, and a lot of people I've seen hate the series past the first book. but I've got to see for myself. And also I want to continue on reading the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and I know that events tie together later on in this one, so things might not make sense if I don't finish out reading what has come out of this series so far. And because of that, I've got to reread House of Earth and Blood, but I'm also planning on reading House of Sky and Breath, and the third one, which I don't remember the name of. So 1 reread, 2 new reads, but I am planning on reading what is out of this series so far, so I can read that new A Court of Thorns and Roses book when it comes out. I'm excited to reread this. I'm very nervous to read the other 2. And with that, we have wrapped up the rereads category, and we've already got a lot of books to read because those are all basically series. That's 12 books right there. So we're already doing a lot. We're already doing a lot of reading for next year. But now for the new to me category, you know, just books I want to read for the first time, you know, the basics of a TBR basically. But first up is one that is a bit out of my comfort zone because this is a like Western fantasy book. This is The Six Gun Tarot by R.S. Belcher. In this book, we are in Galothica, which is a cattle town in the 1860s, and there's strange things happening out here. The sheriff might be dead, his deputy might be part coyote, and there's all sorts of weird stuff happening all around town. But there is a darkness stirring in the silver mines of this town. The sheriff and his crew has to figure out how to stop this darkness before it destroys Galothica and the entire universe. These novels are considered Weird West, that's another name for Western fantasy, and it's a bit out of my comfort zone, but I would really like to try it. And this is a part of a long series, but I'm only hoping to read the first one. I only own the first one, and honestly these can be kind of hard to find, which is why I have a mass paperback copy. So like there's a lot of words on a page, and I fear that maybe this won't be exactly for me, but I would really like to try it in 2025. I actually wanted to read this year, and it didn't happen because I was a little bit intimidated, and I haven't had like all the time in the universe for reading this year, but hopefully, but definitely 2025, this is going to be a book that I read, and I'm hoping I'm going to be pleasantly surprised by this one. And next up is a book that I've technically read part of, but have had a really difficult time with, and that is Nevernight by J. Kristoff. And actually I still have my receipt in here that I was using as a bookmark, and I was on page 78. And I really like the concept of this book. So in this world there are suns, so there's barely ever night, hence the title Nevernight. And we follow our main character Mia, and Mia has entered like this school for assassins, and like she has these trials waiting for her to prove her worth, especially because her father started a rebellion that really didn't work out, that's put her in a really bad way when she decides to join the school for assassins. And now this sounds really cool. This is adult fantasy. It's like in a desert setting. Sounds like really like dark and gritty kind of assassin because it is in the adult category. But the reason why I didn't finish it when I started reading it, like 2 years ago, I think. It was a while ago. It was before Empire the Vampire exists by the same author. I really struggle because it has a lot of footnotes on every page, and the thing is, it doesn't make any sort of sense without the footnotes. And sometimes, like here, as you can see, like from this line down, that's a footnote. There's quite a lot. And switching back and forth between reading the text and reading the footnote and trying to go back to the text has really thrown me off. And I've kind of discovered through this that I don't think I'm really the biggest fan of footnotes. Now, Starling House, which I read this year, which I loved, has footnotes, but they're kind of minor, and it's just kind of for like a little bit of detail, maybe like a sentence. That doesn't draw me out. But this is dropping like really big world building stuff within the footnotes. So actually my plan is for next year is to get this as an audiobook, because I'm hoping maybe that'll help me process it better, because I won't be looking at the words, so I won't be I won't feel like I'm being drawn out of the story. I don't know if that will work, but that is what I'm going to try because I really, really, really want to read this and I really want to try this series. It just hasn't worked out for me so far, but I at least want to read this book out of the series, and if I still hate it on audio, then this just isn't for me, even though it might be a great book for others, but I won't know until I find out. And now let's take a brief intermission to talk about books that I don't own in this category. One that I want to just mention, because I can't really talk about it very much because this is like another book in a series that like everyone thought was kind of complete, and that is Murtagh by Christopher Paolini. Because this takes place after the events of the Inheritance Cycle, and on Goodreads it says the Inheritance Cycle book 5, but I don't really know if it really is a point book 5 or what, but we're going to continue anyways. And Murtagh was a character that was introduced in the second book of the Inheritance Cycle, so I really don't want to give too much away. But from what I've heard of this book, it's really, really good, and I really like the Inheritance Cycle. I might actually need to reread that series as well before I read Murtagh. But I do want to read Murtagh within the next year because I do want to keep up with his fantasy works. And I think he also released some artwork he had for the entire world that Allegasia is in, so he can really do a lot more outside of Allegasia as well, because Allegasia is a very small portion of this entire world that he's made. I really liked Murtagh in the books. Murtagh was actually one of my favorite characters in the series, so I'm excited to have a book that's specifically centering around him instead of Aragon. And next up, I want to talk about a series that I want to continue, and that is the Folk of the Air series. This past year in 2024, I read The Cruel Prince. I actually reread it because the first time I read it years ago, I did not like the story. But on my reread, I loved the book, so now I finally want to continue on with the series, which I've never done before, so I need to read The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing. And I can't really say too much about it because these are continuations of a series once again. But in this world, we follow a human who is living in the Fae world, and her name is Jude. Her fate basically becomes entwined with this fairy prince named Cardan. These are like book 2 favorites, and for years I didn't really get why, because I remember really not liking it back when I read it when I was in high school, but on my reread, I really got it this time. I really loved it, so I want to continue on with The Cruel Prince because I want to be a part of the club. I want to be a part of the club, the Folk of the Air Lovers Club. And next up is a book I've actually never heard anyone talk about, and this is also a part of a series, and this is Dark Rise by S.C. Packett. I think it's how it's pronounced. And in this world, magic has kind of gone to the side. The heroes are no more, everything's in ruins, like the battle between light and dark has kind of been forgotten, and so has magic, except for the stewards, because their role is to keep humanity safe and make sure that the Dark King never returns. And then we follow this young man named Will, and he is on the run because he is being, chased by his mother's killer, trying to finish him off as well. But then one of those stewards, I believe, tells him that his destiny is to fight for the stewards. He gets ushered into this world of magic he never knew about before, and that he is supposed to be a vital key in the war against the dark. And it says, as London is threatened by the Dark King's return, the reborn heroes and villains of a long forgotten war begin to draw battle lines. But as the young descendants of light and dark step into their design roles, old allegiances, old enmities, and old flames are awakened. Will must stand with the last heroes of the light to prevent the fate that destroyed their world from returning to destroy his own. I think that sounds really good. This is another YA fantasy series. I at least want to read the first book within the next year because it's really piqued my interest. How many times can I say that in a video? But I'm really interested in this series. It's kind of more that classic YA vibe with the battle of light and dark, but I don't mind that. So I'm excited to see what this is all about, and it has a pretty high rating, I believe, on Goodreads. Most books I like are in the 3-star range, but this one's 4.16 and it has over 31,000 ratings. So I'm feeling pretty confident. So that's a good sign, at least. Now, I don't really think Goodreads is always correct on those things. I know some people never read books that have below a certain amount of ratings on Goodreads, but I don't really believe in that. I think a good book is a good book and that every book is meant for somebody. However, seeing a lot of good ratings on a book does make you think, oh, this might be a really good one. And I've never seen anyone on BookTube talk about it, so maybe I'll be finding a hidden gem. The next one on the list is also a series, and this is one of my only books on my entire list, which is not a fantasy novel, because this is actually a science fiction novel. And this is the first book of The Expanse, which is Leviathan Wakes, which is by James S.A. Corey. And for this one, I'm just going to read you the description, because for some reason I just cannot remember it, no matter how many times I read it. Humanity has colonized the solar system, Mars, the moon, the asteroid belt, and beyond, but the stars are still out of our reach. Jim Holden is XO of an ice miner, making runs for the rings of Saturn to the mining stations of the belt. When he and his crew stumble upon a derelict ship, the Sculpey, they find themselves in possession of a secret they never wanted, a secret that someone is willing to kill for, and kill on a scale unfathomable to Jim and his crew. War is brewing in the system unless he can find out who left the ship and why. Detective Miller is looking for a girl, one girl in a system of billions, but her parents have money and money talks. When the trail leads him to the Scopoli and the rebel sympathizer Holden, he realizes that this girl may be the key to everything. Holden and Miller must thread the needle between the Earth government, the Outer Planet revolutionaries, and secretive cooperations, and the odds are against them. But out in the belt, the rules are different, and one small ship can change the fate of the universe. That sounds cool. That sounds really, really cool. Like, that's honestly really intriguing, and I'm not even a major sci-fi lover, but to be honest, part of the reason I am reading this series, and reading it now, or at least reading this first book, is because I made a deal with my brother that if I read this book, he has to read either A Court of Thorns and Roses or Throne of Glass, at least the first book. So that's the reason why I'm definitely going to be reading this book in the next year, because I want him to read one of those books, because I think that would be fun. But this honestly does sound really interesting, and I know these books are quite thick, and I don't really know quite yet how I'm going to get my hands on them. Maybe my local library will have them, because I really don't want to read them digitally, because that would be a lot staring at my phone. So I really need to get this book physically somehow. We'll see how it happens, but it is definitely going to be happening in 2025. Next up, I want to talk about another book that I actually own this time, and that is Daughter of the Pirate King. And now I have talked about this book on my channel before, because it was actually on my summer TBR this year. And actually, I've been meaning to read this book for multiple years now. I've had it for multiple years, and every year I go, oh, I'm going to read it during the summer, and then it never happens. But since I'm putting it on the 2025 TBR, it has to happen at some point in the year, and I can't just go like, oh, summer's passed, oh well. It's finally going to happen. And in this book, we follow Alosa, I think, and she is on a quest to receive this ancient hidden map, so she allows herself to be captured by her enemies so she can search their ship. But the only thing that's really standing between her and this map is the very attractive captain of this crew who has captured her. Actually, he's not the captain, he's the first mate. But she is the daughter of the Pirate King, and she thinks no one can really stand in her way for very long. This was probably a horrible description of this book. This book used to be part of a duology, but now there's a third one, which is confusing. But I do want to read at least the duology, even though I do own the third one. This year, does it drive me insane that the third one does not match these covers? Yes, because I'm not the biggest fan of the new covers, but I would really like to read this duology. I haven't really read much pirate fantasy, even though I know it's been popular for quite a few years now, but I just haven't worked my way into reading it. I also want to try Fable at some point, but that's for a different TBR, not for this upcoming year. And finally, we're to the last book on my 2025 TBR, and that is the Book of Living Secrets by Madeline Rue. And in this book, we follow Adele and Connie, and Adele and Connie are obsessed with this book called Moira, I believe. Yeah, Moira. And they have tried writing to the author of Moira, but they've always come back empty-handed, so instead they just reread this book over and over and over again. But then one day they find themselves within the realm of this fantasy romance book, but there is undeniable horrors happening. And there's really something really sinister that was lying just beyond the page. They have to rewrite their own story arcs within this novel so they can try to escape this story alive. I think this sounds really cool. I've been wanting to read it for a while. To me, this is a very fall read, but like, who cares? I'm just gonna read it whenever. I think I'm actually gonna read this one fairly soon, to be completely honest with you. I've been really wanting to read more gothic fantasy because I love Juniper and Thorn so much. So I really want to read more gothic fantasies, and I think this could be a perfect book for that. I'm really excited about this one. It's also books within books, which is something that I love. And also, like, this is probably the prettiest book in this stack. Like, are you kidding me? That's just so pretty. And it says on the back, fall into the book of living secrets. Adele opened her eyes with a jolt. Oh my God, she whispered, blinking rapidly. It worked. It really worked. I can't believe it. She rubbed her eyes, pinched herself. Nope, it was all real. She had landed in the park where Moira and Severin made their pact to dance at the ball. Connie must have come through too. She was somewhere in the book already, but at a different point in the story. I'll find you, Connie. I'm already on the right track, she whispered. Yes, an unseen voice murmured back. You are? We are so pleased you came. Like, does that not sound like everything to you? Like, I'm so excited about this book. I've never seen anyone talk about this, so I'm hoping for another hidden gem here. I'm really excited about the Book of Living Secrets. I'm really, really hoping it doesn't disappoint me. But I'm leaning strongly towards the fact that it is not. I think it sounds so cool. It's kind of giving me a House of Salt and Sorrow vibes based off the description, and I really did enjoy that book. So I am really excited about the last book on my TBR. And with that is the end of the video. Those are all the books on my 2025 TBR. As I said before, there was a lot of series on this list, but I'm not planning on reading every single book out of every single one of these series. There's some of the series I want to complete and some of them just the first book I want to read. So hopefully I can manage it all. This year, this is much longer than my 2024 TBR list because obviously I am a really big mood reader. I'm not going to pick out every single book I'm going to read in 2025 right now at the end of 2024. So I'm going to read tons of books that aren't these, but these are the core books that I really just want to be able to check off my little list in my reading journal at the end of 2025 and feel like I accomplished something. That's kind of it. Leave me a comment down below if you have read any of these books and your spoiler free thoughts on them. You can also tell me some books you have on your 2025 TBR, or if you have a video detailing your 2025 TBR, let me know and I'll go check it out as well. If you like this video, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And also, if you aren't already, you can subscribe. I am posting an awful lot in December and kind of want to keep the ball rolling. I am having so much fun and I think my videos are improving as I go. So yeah, that's kind of it. I don't have much else to say. So I guess I'm signing off now. Okay, bye.